Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to take a dense stack of sources, articles, candid notes, high-level conversations, and really just pull out the most crucial, memorable insights for you, so you can walk away well-informed, but without the information overload.
And today, we're taking a look at something I think a lot of people dream about. We're peeling back the layers on what it truly means to live a year abroad.
Right, the unvarnished reality of it.
Exactly. Our source material today is particularly rich. It's focused on a really candid conversation between two friends, Maya and Leo, after Leo spent a full year living in Berlin.
And this isn't just your typical travel chat.
Not at all. The depth of their reflection is what allows us to do what we'd call a C1 level analysis of adaptation. It's mature, it's thoughtful, and it just immediately cuts through that idealized facade of what expat life is supposed to be.
That's right. So our mission today, just to be clear, is not about finding the best doner kebab shops in Berlin or the cheapest flights. It's about synthesizing this core conflict, this gap between the expectation, which is so often, long holiday, and the ground level reality.
A reality that demands constant integration, constant resilience. We're really going to be dissecting the machinery of what true adaptation looks like.
And the source material just hands us the thesis right at the start.
It really does. When Maya asks about the experience, Leo's answer isn't a simple good or bad. He calls it a mix. And then he says this crucial thing. He says, it's definitely not just a long holiday.
And that one phrase just perfectly encapsulates the tension we're exploring today.
It does.
That idea, that the perceived success story of living abroad is, well, it's fundamentally flawed.
Yeah.
And that feels instantly relevant, doesn't it? Whether you're thinking about a career shift or moving to a new city or even just trying to understand the struggles behind someone else's apparent success.
Yeah, the unseen struggles.
This deep dive into the gap between aspiration and, frankly, administration is just invaluable. We're analyzing the psychological, the logistical endurance that's required to truly integrate.
Indeed. And it forces us to confront a pretty tough fact, that major life changes are rarely about those glamorous peak moments. They're defined by the necessary, often tedious work of adapting to very, very mundane routines.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Let's start with this initial assessment and move into what we're calling the myth versus the mundane. So Leo makes it clear from the get-go that his year abroad wasn't this seamless, extended vacation. What is it that creates this pervasive romanticization trap?
I think the trap is created by proximity, or maybe more accurately, the lack of it. People romanticize living abroad because the narrative they consume is just. It's overwhelmingly filtered.
Filtered how?
Well, they see the product, the lifestyle, but they don't get to witness the manufacturing process behind it.
And the source material points a finger directly at social media, right? And just the general external narrative. It all gets reduced to these highly curated aesthetic moments.
Coffee shops and sightseeing.
Exactly.
And that kind of aesthetic curation is, it's inherently dishonest, isn't it? Because it focuses exclusively on leisure. It presents this skewed reality where the person is only engaged in consumption,
Highlighting the beautiful outcome.
while systematically editing out all the effort that's necessary to sustain that outcome. So, we see the perfectly poured latte in a cool Berlin cafe, but we don't see the 3 weeks Leo spent trying to open the bank account he needed just to pay for it.
The cost of admission is hidden. That's a great way to put it. So when we see that image, what we're really looking at is a tourist itinerary.
A temporary engagement. It's not a blueprint for sustained life.
So that's the core difference then, separating travel from residency.
It is. As a traveler, you're a temporary consumer. You are relying on infrastructure that's built for tourists, your financial life is all transactional, and your relationship with the local complexity is. It's brief. You have an exit date.
Which is a huge psychological safety net.
The huge one. But residency, as Leo discovered, it demands permanent systemic integration. You can't just stand outside the system and admire its architecture.
Is to climb inside and actually operate the machinery.
Yes, the machinery that supports daily existence. You have to get your hands dirty with the most unglamorous parts of civil society, the parts that are totally invisible when you're just visiting for a week.
And this realization, it leads directly to the anchor of their whole conversation, which is the observation that the reality of living abroad is
mostly logistics.
such an unromantic word.
It's the most unromantic word, but it's the truest definition of the expatriate experience.
Logistics. It implies coordination, systems, routine maintenance, administrative oversight.
It means that the glamorous parts, the cultural exploration you dreamed about, they are ultimately dwarfed by the bureaucratic and administrative tasks that form this grinding bedrock of your daily life.
And that's where the romantic vision just completely collapses.
It just falls apart under the weight of the mundane. The second you transition from a temporary traveler to a permanent resident, the majority of your mental energy has to be diverted from exploration to administration.
You're literally fighting for your existence.
You're fighting to secure your legal, your financial, and your physical existence inside a completely foreign operational framework.
I have to wonder, though, when Leo made this point about logistics, did Maya in the conversation, did she push back at all? Did she maybe suggest he was just unprepared for being independent?
That's a good question. And they do touch on it. They both acknowledge that, some level of unpreparedness is just unavoidable. But they frame the complexity as systemic.
Systemic? How so?
They use this concept, infrastructure blindness. In your home country, all the administrative infrastructure is invisible. It just works seamlessly around you.
Right. You don't think about the steps you take to pay a bill or renew your driver's license. You just do it.
Exactly. But moving abroad means that infrastructure, which was previously invisible, it suddenly becomes this highly complex obstacle course that you have to manually navigate step by painful step.
So if the romantic idea is the beautiful city, the destination, then the logistics are what? The vehicle maintenance?
Yeah, and the specific type of fuel it needs and the mandatory road checks and having to constantly update these unfamiliar maps just to keep the car running every single day.
Wow.
And the sheer complexity of these tasks is what defines the whole experience. It creates this continuous low-level stress that accumulates into a really substantial cognitive load.
And this immense burden, this is what sets the stage for our next section, right?
Yeah.
Getting into the nitty-gritty of it all.
Yes, navigating the bureaucratic labyrinth.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because the source material doesn't just vaguely mention logistics. Leo gives very concrete examples of this unexpected administrative burden. He names 3 pillars of practical difficulty.
He does. And they're hurdles that exist everywhere, but they are fundamentally transformed by being in a foreign context. So he lists paying bills, figuring out taxes, and just dealing with bureaucracy in general.
These are the things that consume your time and energy. They replace cultural immersion with, administrative drudgery?
That's the perfect word for it. Drudgery.
So let's start with paying bills.
Yeah.
At home, for most of us, this is automated. It requires minimal thought. Why does the source identify something so simple as a major stressor in Berlin?
Because the simplest tasks become exponentially complex when the systems are unfamiliar. I mean, think about it. In Germany, there's a heavy reliance on specific banking structures, like the IBAN system for transfers, or the need for a specific German bank account to even authorize essential direct debits for your utilities or your rent. These are tiny details, but they require conscious learning.
You don't just pay the bill.
No, you have to learn the entire local financial nomenclature and architecture first, and that often requires you to show up in person with certified documents just to get set up.
And the risk if you make a mistake must be so much higher.
It's amplified, absolutely. If you input the wrong data for an automatic payment, it's not just a small inconvenience. It could lead to your utilities getting cut off or getting a negative mark on your credit in a system you have no idea how to repair.
So it becomes a high-stakes task, not a 5-minute automation.
Absolutely. And you have to understand the communications, too. Which one of these 10 letters they sent you is the actual invoice? Which one is the confirmation? Are they using the formal German Sie or the informal Du?
Just decoding the format and the tone takes energy.
It all takes energy.
Okay, so if paying bills is complex,
Mm-hmm.
then figuring out taxes, that's compounded exponentially.
Oh, massively. Taxes are a nightmare for most people globally. But in a foreign context, and especially one as structurally complex as Germany's tax code, it's not just a math problem.
It's a huge jurisdictional, linguistic, and time commitment.
It's an institutional clash. Tax compliance means you have to navigate this incredibly complex legislative jargon, which is dense even for native speakers, but now it's in a foreign language.
And if he still has financial ties back home,
Then you're dealing with dual jurisdictional issues. You have to figure out which income is taxed where, which treaties apply, how to get and use your German tax ID, the Steuer ID. It demands a kind of cross-cultural accounting knowledge just to stay compliant.
and the mental energy just to find the right forms or find an accountant who even understands international issues.
Yeah.
That's a massive drain.
That is precisely the time that the romanticized vision promised would be spent exploring museums or sitting in parks.
A temporal displacement.
That's it. The time you reserved for leisure and cultural enrichment is instead spent researching municipal codes. That is the definition of the logistical grind.
And that leads us to the third pillar, the unavoidable friction, often embodied by that one German word.
Bureaucracy.
Bureaucracy. And this covers everything, right? Visa renewals, residency permits.
The Aufenthaltstitel. Registering your address, the Anmeldung, getting health insurance. Just proving you exist, basically.
And this is the most taxing part.
I think so, because it involves this continuous friction with systems that are designed for long-term integrated citizens who already know all the unwritten rules.
Right.
In Berlin, for instance, there's the legendary Termin culture, the need to book these highly coveted appointments weeks, sometimes months in advance for even the most basic administrative task. That's a huge systemic challenge.
It's not just the waiting, is it?
No, it's the requirement for specific, often obscure physical documents. You need certified translations or passport photos that meet very exact specifications, or the signature of your landlord on a housing confirmation form, the Wohnungsgeberbestätigung.
These systems are not designed for a newly arrived foreigner who needs things done with some urgency.
Not at all. The process demands constant vigilance, meticulous document management, and a level of proactive planning that just runs completely counter to the spontaneous, easy life that so many expats dream of.
This is that administrative exhaustion that just eats away at the holiday feeling.
It turns every single municipal interaction into a draining, high-pressure event.
But I want to push on this a bit. Leo was in Berlin, a huge international city. Couldn't he just hire an expat service or an English-speaking accountant and just bypass some of that? Why is this friction an unavoidable part of the logistics?
That's a really critical question, and it reveals the limits of outsourcing. Yes, you can absolutely hire help for the very specialized stuff like filing your taxes. But the core integration tasks are legally non-delegable. You, as the individual, must physically show up at the Bürgeramt for your Anmeldung. You have to go to the bank yourself to verify your identity. You have to be the one to sign the lease.
So even with a professional helper, you're still the main actor in the bureaucratic drama.
You are. The friction might be reduced, but the need for your personal engagement, your accountability, remains very high.
I see.
The service might tell you what documents to bring and when to go, but they can't absorb the emotional stress of the encounter itself, especially when you're trying to navigate it all in a language you don't fully master.
And that's where the linguistic context just pours gasoline on the fire.
Exactly. The inherent stress of paying taxes or dealing with immigration is just magnified tenfold when you are trying to translate complex legal instructions in real time without your native cognitive shortcuts.
It's a high cognitive load.
The highest. The energy you would normally reserve for dealing with the complexity of the task gets diverted first to just dealing with the language. You're solving two high-stakes problems at the same time. What do they need, and what are the words they're using to describe what they need?
Which means you feel like you're always operating at a critical disadvantage.
Always. And when the communication feels insecure, when you know a simple question from you could lead to a catastrophic misunderstanding in an immigration office, the stakes feel exponentially higher. A routine interaction becomes a survival event.
And that continuous administrative maintenance, that cognitive load, that's what forces the experience to feel like sustained work.
Regardless of how pleasant the scenery is, the mental bandwidth required for stable existence it displaces the bandwidth you thought you'd have for exploration and fun.
We've mapped out the physical grind of it, but that exhaustion clearly bleeds into your emotional life. So let's talk about the profound cost of the language barrier on social connection. This brings us to Section 3, the language barrier and cultural alienation.
The source material has a really profound insight here. Even in a city as international as Berlin, where, a lot of people speak English, Leo and Maya both noted that this feeling of being an outsider remains stubbornly persistent.
It's more than just a communication failure.
Much more. When Leo says it can be quite alienating, he's describing a psychological state that's far deeper than just, not understanding the bus schedule.
Alienation implies separation, a lack of deep belonging, even if you have superficial connections.
And this detachment is often invisible to the outside world, because from the outside, the expat is functionally competent. They can work, they can pay their bills, they can order a coffee.
But the alienation sets in when they can't participate fully in the texture of social and cultural life.
Exactly, the texture. And the source is excellent at detailing what specifically is missed when you're operating without the ease of your native tongue. Leo mentions missing the ease of expressing yourself.
Let's break that down. What is ease of expression?
I think it's fundamental to your personality. In your native language, the path from a complex thought or a subtle emotion to articulating it is instantaneous. It's unconscious.
But in a second language,
Every single sentence requires pre-processing. You're translating, you're adjusting the grammar, you're retrieving vocabulary.
that cognitive friction must fundamentally slow down your personality.
It does. You're constantly choosing the easiest path to being understood, which means you sacrifice subtlety, you sacrifice wit, you sacrifice emotional depth. You're always on a slight delay, mentally preparing for the conversation instead of just being in it, being your authentic, unguarded self.
And this deficit, it profoundly affects your social connections. The source identifies two things that are absolutely critical to genuine social bonds that just get lost.
Subtle humor and the understanding of cultural references.
Okay, let's spend some real time on subtle humor, because this seems to be where that outsider status is felt most keenly. Humor like irony or sarcasm or wordplay, it relies almost entirely on a shared cultural context.
And specific linguistic nuances that you've acquired over decades, not months. Humor is rapid, it's shared, and it requires this deep mutual understanding of social norms, history, linguistic shortcuts.
So if you're still processing the literal meaning of the words,
You miss the quick turn of phrase, you're too slow to laugh, or you misunderstand the premise of the joke entirely.
and the social cost of that failure is cumulative, it's not just one missed joke.
No. If you consistently miss the joke, however subtly, you are signaling to the group that you are not fully plugged into their shared worldview. You become the person who needs the joke explained to them.
Which just kills the moment for everyone.
It shatters the spontaneous joy of it, and it creates this persistent, quiet divide. We could call it a contextual debt. Native speakers communicate using this massive shared library of context. Jokes are just references to that library.
And the non-native speaker doesn't have a library card.
Exactly. Which forces the native speaker to simplify or explain, and that's cognitively taxing for them, and it just dulls the whole interaction for everybody.
And the same principle applies to cultural references, right? The shared societal touchstones.
Yeah, the local media, a historical event, a famous old advertisement, an inside joke that everyone in that society just understands implicitly.
Every time a native speaker makes an offhand comment about, say, a local politician scandal from 5 years ago,
The non-native speaker experiences this momentary, isolating plank. You're constantly accumulating these cultural gaps, and that prevents the easy, deep understanding that cements true friendships and a sense of community.
so the real barrier isn't just vocabulary, which you can fix with studying, it's the cultural metadata. It's the shared history.
Which takes years and years of passive absorption to acquire. The effort required is just massive.
Which is why we frame the native language as a cognitive and emotional comfort zone.
Yes. And when that security blanket is removed, your sense of vulnerability just increases dramatically. Your default self, the witty, quick-thinking, fully expressive you, is replaced by this diminished, cautious, translated version of yourself.
And it reinforces that outsider status, even if you are, functionally excellent in the language.
You can survive, you can work, you can do business, but that lack of linguistic intimacy is a constant reminder that you are operating on the periphery of the cultural circle, not at its center.
It makes you realize that fluency is such a complex spectrum.
It really is. Transactional fluency lets you manage tasks. But intimate fluency, that lets you build a genuine, unguarded self and deep relationships within that culture. And the struggle is that deep residency demands the latter, even if most of your preparation only focused on the former.
Given all of this, the administrative friction, the cognitive load, the linguistic effort, the social alienation, it would be so easy to just throw in the towel.
It would.
But the source material emphatically pivots here, and it transitions into what we're calling Section 4, the transformative effect.
It does. Maya asks Leo, has it changed you, though? And his response is just so immediate and certain. Oh, 100%.
And that's the ultimate validation of the challenge.
It is. It confirms that the experience, precisely because it was so difficult, fundamentally transforms the individual.
Okay, let's slow down and analyze the exact mechanism of growth here. Leo says the core driver is necessity. Stepping out of your comfort zone forces you to grow. This isn't passive learning. It's an active transformation dictated by the environment.
The growth is forged under duress. Every bill you pay incorrectly, every complicated bureaucratic encounter, every linguistic fumble, these aren't failures. They are micro-challenges that demand immediate problem-solving, self-reliance, and resilience.
So that daily grind of overcoming the systemic friction, the logistics, directly builds character.
It does. When you successfully manage just one of those complex administrative problems, it gives you the confidence and the tools to tackle the next one. It inherently lowers your threshold of fear for future uncertainty.
And the specific outcome they identify is resilience.
Yeah.
In this context, what does resilience really mean? It's not just patience.
No, it's adaptive persistence. It's the ability to continually tackle problems when you don't have the optimal tools, the right language, the right financial history, the right cultural knowledge, without giving up or retreating into isolation.
So resilience means waking up, knowing that today you have to figure out a new health insurance form written in High German, and even though you're exhausted from doing it yesterday and the day before, you have the inner strength and the mental framework to just approach the problem again.
And often with insufficient resources, it's the complete antithesis of an idealized vacation, where obstacles are external and you can just pay a premium to make them go away.
Here the obstacles are structural, they're systemic, they're ongoing.
And true resilience is built by continually pushing through that slow, grinding administrative wall, acknowledging how hard it is, but refusing to surrender to it.
But resilience is only half the reward. The second major growth factor Leo mentions is gaining a critical distance. He says he has a new perspective on your own culture.
You see things from a distance, and this is, I would argue, the most valuable, non-tangible reward of the entire experience. It's a metacultural skill.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when you're immersed in your native culture, its norms, its unspoken rules, its infrastructure, it's all invisible. You just accept it as the universal default reality.
But moving abroad gives you an indispensable external reference point.
Exactly. Seeing things from a distance implies you can hold two complex systems in your mind at the same time. By living inside the highly structured German system, Leo can now compare its efficiency, its rigid planning, its social etiquette to his home country's approach, which he had previously just accepted without a second thought.
It allows for critical evaluation.
Yes. When you see how a different society handles public transport or childcare or social contracts, you realize your home country's way isn't divinely ordained or objectively superior. It's just a way. It's a specific cultural product with its own inefficiencies and biases.
So for example, maybe Leo always complained about bureaucracy at home. But then he experiences German bureaucracy, which, while incredibly structured, might operate with its own kind of slow, meticulous efficiency.
And that comparison forces him to refine his definition of efficiency itself. It forces you to question fundamental assumptions about what is normal or good.
It fosters a metacultural understanding.
The ability to analyze culture itself rather than just live inside it. And that skill is permanent. It transcends the time he spent in Berlin.
And I imagine this critical distance also extends to your personal identity. We talked about how the language barrier forces you into a translated version of yourself.
It does. When you're an outsider, you often have to project yourself differently, and the local culture reflects a different persona back at you. That interaction forces you to reevaluate who you are, separate from the implicit cultural expectations of your homeland.
You discover which parts of your personality were genuine and which were just reactions to your familiar social environment.
Absolutely.
So the conclusion here is that the challenge isn't just worth enduring. The challenge itself is the source of the worth.
Yes. The difficulty of navigating the logistics and the language is the crucible that forges the resilience and the critical perspective. The depth of the growth is directly proportional to the effort you expend overcoming those unglamorous, frustrating realities.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, where we synthesize this all into the overall value proposition. After detailing all that immense friction, the strain, the alienation, is it worth it? And Leo's conclusion is definitive.
He says, I wouldn't trade it, despite the difficulties. And that affirmation is so critical because it avoids the trap of romanticizing the experience in hindsight. He fully acknowledges how hard it was.
The maturity of the reflection is right there. He accepts the past difficulty without trying to minimize it.
Exactly. And this confirms the grass is not always greener principle. When Maya asks about that old cliche, Leo's response is, precisely.
So he's validating the reality that moving abroad doesn't just magically solve your problems or create an idyllic life.
Not at all. It just substitutes one set of systemically embedded challenges with a completely new, geographically and culturally different set.
But the difference lies in the nature of the struggle.
Yes. The reward is found in how you overcome that new set of challenges. The experience is characterized as challenging, but it's a rewarding experience. That phrase demands that the pain and the gain exist at the same time.
And the source describes the reward as a true learning curve.
Which I love, because that phrase implies continuous steep development, not the passive acquisition of some superficial knowledge. A learning curve suggests a sustained period of high effort followed by rapid, necessary improvement just to be able to function.
And it's a holistic learning curve.
Completely. It's not just about language. It's learning how to adapt your entire cognitive process, your emotional responses, your administrative behavior, just to function effectively in an environment that offers you zero implicit support.
You're rebuilding your operating system from the ground up.
While the machine is still running.
It's like the difference between reading a survival guide about how to start a fire.
And actually being out in the freezing wilderness trying to rub two damp sticks together.
Yes. The theoretical knowledge is nothing compared to the experiential reality. That reality fundamentally changes your muscle memory, your approach to problems, your relationship with failure.
So let's synthesize this for the listener. This deep dive has revealed a critical, non-obvious truth. The immediate, painful friction, the logistics, the alienation, the bureaucracy, it is necessary for the long-term, non-tangible gain.
Which is the resilience, the self-reliance, and that critical perspective.
That balance, the fact that the hardship is the investment, that's the ultimate aha moment here. The value of this kind of life is not found in the superficial consumption of a new culture.
It's found in the sustained, high-effort engagement required to navigate its systemic undercurrents.
The experience of living abroad, as reflected in Leo's measured maturity, it's not about finding paradise. It's about finding out, under real pressure, just how capable and resilient you are when all your established support structures and cognitive shortcuts are suddenly irrelevant.
It confirms that real, foundational growth doesn't happen when things are easy. It happens when the seemingly mundane tasks of daily life are transformed into these high-stakes, demanding challenges.
That friction, that grind, is the true engine of personal transformation.
And that transformation, once you've achieved it, is permanent.
It is. You gain tools, the resilience, the perspective that stay with you no matter where you go next. And that is the lasting, invaluable reward that supersedes any of the difficulty he experienced in that year.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think we've accomplished our mission. We've moved past the aesthetic cafe photos, past the romantic ideas of sightseeing, and we've gotten deep into the weeds of international tax codes, the Anmeldung process, and the quiet, persistent struggle of trying to land a joke in a foreign tongue.
We've established that the true reward of living abroad is not the physical destination. It's the intense resilience and the invaluable critical perspective that are forged in adapting to the mundane reality of systemic integration.
It demands a willingness to engage with the difficult, unromantic parts of daily life.
Absolutely.
So building on this powerful reflection from Leo and Maya, and specifically on this realization that navigating bureaucracy and linguistic subtlety is what defines the difference between travel and true residency, we want to leave you with one final provocative thought to consider.
If the effortlessness with which we all operate within our own home systems, the instant bill payments using our familiar language, the assumption that institutions are accessible, if that makes all of our infrastructure invisible to us, then we have to ask ourselves, to what extent does this privileged ease prevent us from truly comprehending the immense cognitive load and inherent resilience required by those who must perpetually operate outside their zone of competence?
Whether they're new immigrants, long-term expatriates, or temporary residents.
Exactly. Think about the invisible effort required just for them to simply function every single day.
A profound thought for you to carry forward as you interact with the systems around you and the people who navigate them. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
We'll see you next time.